And we're going to start, I'm going to play off of Rudy Giuliani on whether or not Trump has the power to pardon himself. Now, keep in mind, this comes from a New York Times piece that came out over the weekend. A leak of a letter that was sent by Trump's lawyers to the prosecutor's office, and I suspect, I don't have any way of knowing, that the prosecutor's office leaked it to the New York Times. I don't know, but it would make sense. And they cover a number of issues. And then what happens in this article that the New York Times puts together is it has its reporters like this Maggie Haberman, or whatever the hell the moron's name is, and they highlight interpretations for you. And say, wow, look at this over here, and what does this mean? And that means that. So it's not even a news article, really. It's a weird thing. But in one of those boxes, those highlighted boxes, she said something to the effect that this is a very important but ambiguous line in here about the president. Can he pardon himself? Is that what they're suggesting? And so, as you might expect, incredibly predictable, George Stephanopoulos, lifelong Democrat, Clintonoid, head of the war room for Bill Clinton, partisan, now a journalist, partisan. He clings to that, and he throws it to Rudy Giuliani. Cut one, go.
The letter also cites the president's pardon power. Do you and the president's attorneys believe the president has the power to pardon himself?
He's not, but he probably does. I mean, he has no intention of pardoning himself, but he probably does. It doesn't say he can't. I mean, that's another really interesting constitutional argument. Can the president pardon himself? I used to run the pardon attorney. It would be an open question. I think it would probably get answered by, gosh, that's what the Constitution says, and if you want to change it, change it. But, yeah.
A lot of focus on the president.
I think the political ramifications of that would be tough. Pardoning other people is one thing. Pardoning yourself is another. Other presidents have pardoned people in circumstances like this, both in their administration and sometimes the next president, even if a different party will come along and pardon.
I will answer this question, but not yet. Because the media have determined that he can't. Now, they have no constitutional background. They can't point to a single thing at the Constitutional Convention or any of the ratification conventions. And keep in mind, this is the same media and the same leftists, the progressive leftists, who despise the Constitution, who are constantly looking for ways to skirt it, to avoid it, as they expand the massive the federal government and its central power. So NBC's Peter Alexander to Sarah Huckabee Sanders at the White House press briefing today. Cut two, go.
Does the president believe that he is above the law?
Now stop. See that? He doesn't ask, what does the Constitution say about a president pardoning himself? He says, does the president believe that he is above the law? Isn't the law determined by what the Constitution says? Not by what the left insists? Does the president believe that he's above the law if he pardons himself? Is that what the Constitution says? That a president would be defying the pardon clause of the Constitution if he or she would pardon him or herself? Is that what it says? Let's start from the top. Cut two, go.
Does the president believe that he is above the law?
Certainly not. The president hasn't done anything wrong.
He's done anything wrong. I guess the question is, does the president believe the framers envisioned a system where the president couldn't pardon himself, where the president could be above the law?
Certainly the Constitution very clearly lays out the law. And once again, the president hasn't done anything wrong, and we feel very comfortable in that front.
But you just a moment ago said it's not that clear. So I guess simply put, does the president...
Well, sir. Boy. Rambling buffoon. If it's not that clear, then why did you ask, does the president believe that he's above the law? Why did you put the question that way? Why did you put the question that way? As if you're the press person for Bob Mueller, or Adam Schiff, or Joe Scarborough. Go ahead.
He is above the law.
Certainly no one is above the law.
Above the law. Then we have Joe Scarborough, who is becoming a true drama queen with his phony drama antics over there. And Mika Brzezinski. Cut three, go.
Let's start off with this, and we'll try and methodically get through some disturbing news here. President Trump's legal team is thumping its chest when it comes to the scope of the president's powers. In their take, the president can pardon himself, cannot obstruct justice, doesn't need to testify, and cannot be indicted. We'll get to their thinking behind those significant assertions in just a moment. Right.
Just like Erdogan.
This is not America when you're talking.
No. These are not people who believe in basic constitutional foundations. But it's shocking. So many things said this weekend, absolutely shocking, that a guy that used to be a U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York is actually stating this.
No, he's not stating it. He's repeating it. Now, let me break this down for you, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, can a president be indicted while he's in office? My opinion is irrelevant. Everybody's opinion is irrelevant. What's relevant is what the Department of Justice has said. Because Mr. Mueller is compelled to follow the policies and the regulations of the Department of Justice, because he works for the Department of Justice under the Deputy Attorney General. He can't bring an indictment if the position of his bosses is that he can't. And the two memos we're talking about in 1973 and 2000, and they are significant legal documents. Significant. The 2000 document that I printed out is 38 pages in length with scores of footnotes, references to Supreme Court cases, and on and on and on. A very mighty legal document. And they conclude you cannot indict a sitting president for the reasons I've explained now for how many months? Only a grand jury can remove a president. Excuse me. A grand jury cannot remove a president. Only the Senate can remove a president. The president's never been forced to testify in front of a federal grand jury. President's never been indicted while in office, and a president's never been even removed by the Senate. Mr. Mueller must comply with the positions of the Department of Justice. He's an inferior appointee, according to the left, even though he's really not, but I'm playing along. Now, what about this pardon power? What's the Constitution say under Article 2, Section 2? It's simple. The power to grant reprieves and pardons for offenses against the United States, except in cases of impeachment, is vested in the president. So we're talking about federal criminal acts or possible federal criminal acts. Not state criminal acts, not federal civil acts, not state civil acts, not local parking tickets. It's limited to crimes or potential crimes or possible crimes or maybe crimes, and at the federal level. Period. It says nothing else. It doesn't say it doesn't cover the president himself. Now, when you read Madison's notes, when you look at the Constitutional Convention, the subject of whether a president can pardon himself never came up. And so you look at the language of the Constitution. Is there anything in that language that says the president can pardon except for himself? No, it doesn't. Not a word. So in order to add that, you are thereby rewriting Article 2, Section 2 of the Constitution. Now, the Democrats, to a man and woman, have been waving this so-called memo around dated August 5, 1974, that is barely 2.5 pages long and has no footnotes to anything. And the vast majority of it has nothing to do with executive action. The vast majority of it's talking about legislative action, so we're not even talking about that. What does this memo say that they keep waving around and saying it's the position of the Department of Justice that a president can't pardon himself? When we come back, I'll explain it. Go.
Mark Levin.
All right, ladies and gentlemen. What does this memo say, this August 5th, 1974 memo that the Democrats are flashing all about? The vast majority is not even relevant. Here's what it says. The key sentence. Under the fundamental rule that no one may be a judge in his own case, it would seem that the question should be answered in the negative. Excuse me? Excuse me? So the president can't pardon himself because under the fundamental rule that no one may be a judge in his own case, it would seem that the question should be answered in the negative? That is a definitive statement of the Constitution? That's a definitive statement of our history? That's a definitive statement of the text? That is a joke. And so a couple of days before Nixon resigned, when the Department of Justice was thin on employees who were resigning left and right, some bureaucrat walks in there, Mary Lawton, acting Assistant Attorney General for the Office of Legal Counsel, writes this to the Deputy Attorney General, and that's the case? That's the argument? That the president can't be a judge in his own case? That has nothing to do with the Constitution. Now, you say, Mark, you embrace those other two Department of Justice memos. Why won't you embrace this one? I'll explain in 1 minute.